Hey there, everyone. Welcome to yet another Teach Kevin Your Thing session. Today's session, we're going to be diving into the world of ORMs and TypeScript. So I have Sabin over here, and we'll be talking about Prisma today. How you doing, Sabin?
Hey, I'm doing great. How you doing?
I'm really excited and geeked out. I don't know. Perhaps I'm the only one that gets excited to talk about ORMs these days, but I think you also are because you work at Prisma. So I guess we are both ORM nerds. So before we get into like what we're talking about today, can you introduce yourself? Tell us who Sabin Adams is, what you've been doing, and what you currently do, and any other thing you want to share.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, my name is Sabin Adams. I've been a developer for roughly 9 years, going on 10, I think. I started off pretty young, just developing with my dad, who's also a developer. And then, like right out of high school, basically, I started programming at a company. Um, I started off my career doing full stack development with Cold Fusion and Angular JS and a lot of just like vanilla JavaScript and CSS and stuff like that, along with Cold Fusion in the backend, which is sort of like a Java based language. Did that for a bunch of years, played with different front end frameworks along with Cold Fusion. Um, got into React, got into Vue, started doing a lot of Node.js 5 or 6 years ago. Um, and yeah, that's taken me to where I am now at Prisma. I was working at a company who used Prisma, and I really liked the product, so I started creating content about them, talking about them a lot on Twitter and all that good stuff. And they reached out to me with a developer advocate job. I had never heard of developer advocacy, and it was exciting to me. I liked making content, and I also liked coding, so it seemed like the perfect fit. And that's where I'm at now.
I love your story a great deal, especially because your dad was a developer. Like my very first view into the world of programming was from my dad with notes, basic notes. So I kind of know how that is. So that's amazing. And yeah, you said you worked at a company that was using Prisma before, like so that's interesting. So before we even get into what Prisma is, right? So we have a couple of things going on. So first of all, what's an ORM, right? Because Prisma is an ORM for TypeScript, JavaScript, right? So what's an ORM? When would you need one, right? Like, what's the problem it's solving, first of all?
hmm Yeah,
Mhm.
so I think the main problem an ORM solves is it unifies the way you access your data into one single language. Um, if you look at languages like SQL and even the MongoDB query language, they can get pretty complex, and there's a ton of things you can do with it, which is awesome. You can make really complicated, advanced performant queries doing that, but it requires this deep set of knowledge on how to formulate those queries and how to build queries that are best tailored towards your data. With an ORM, it allows you to sort of abstract those queries into the language of your choice. That way, if you're working on a team, not everyone has to be experts on writing those SQL queries. And the queries that do get generated are done so in a consistent way that you don't really have to think about.
Mm, interesting. That's quite fun. So, just to be sure, we in computer science we are notorious for acronyms. So, what does ORM means in this context, please?
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so an ORM is an object relational mapper. So it basically maps the data that you want to what's in your database. You tell it what you want, and you get back exactly that.
Cool, cool. I love it. So yeah, so what makes Prisma, what does Prisma brings to the table of ORMs and for people who have the need for what ORM solve?
Mhm. Yeah, so the big sell with Prisma is that, as you've seen on social media and things like that a lot, our developer experience tends to be one of the best out there. Just the APIs we provide are more intuitive, I think, than a lot of the other ORMs out there. And then, of course, the type safety. All the types that we generate they're not static types, they're dynamic
Mhm.
types. So based
Okay.
on the data you query for, the type you get back is going to match exactly what data that you would expect to get back from your query. So all those things together make it a really nice experience. And I think the third main thing that we bring to the table is that Prisma itself is an ORM, but Prisma as a platform provides a lot of cool tools that you'll see coming out, like our Accelerate and Pulse. And Prisma Client, our ORM, is the way you actually interact with those products.
Some stuff. So yeah. Okay, so this is 2023, right? I've seen some talks, some articles about folks that complain about ORMs. I love ORMs. I have the one I personally like, but are there complaints like unfounded? Like, is there basis for the complaints of like you don't need a ORM adds a lot of issues? Like, are there any known issues that normally you find in an ORM that's with Prisma, for example, you don't really have those issues? And yeah,
Mhm.
let's talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of those comments are coming from the perspective um, of being able to control the way your application works. Of course, developers, they really like to have control of what they're doing. Black box solutions are never, I don't want to say never, but they're often scary to use because you can't really dive in and like tweak things to work how you want them. And that's exactly what's going on here, where people who say that you don't need an ORM are people who want to be able to write the queries themselves so they know exactly how it's working. And I think there definitely is weight to that. I've even been in scenarios where I'm using an ORM, but I need to drop down and write my own raw SQL instead of using the ORM just to make sure a query works exactly how I want to. So I think there's cases for both.
Interesting. So from what you say, it's not an either or. You could, use the just like for example, you're doing Tailwind CSS, for example, right? You could also write your own CSS. So if you are using like an oral, you could, for those cases where you want to like, fine tune the performance, you could drop down and write SQL. Is that it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. If you think about what an ORM does, it has that abstraction overriding the actual SQL.
Okay.
With that inherently comes the fact that you can't
Okay.
cover every scenario. The ORM is designed to do the thing one way. So when you need to do something another way, that's when you would drop to raw SQL.
Cool. I think that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think that's enough for the theories and talks. I want to see Prisma in action and whatever you want to show me and how you could. I'm really interested in the type safe data access to this conversation. So, are you ready to like get into it and we just start hacking out on Prisma?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. I'm sharing your screen now.
Awesome. So I did set up a starter project here. All I did was basically created a folder that has TypeScript installed and just a simple file. So what we're going to do is like add Prisma to here, set up a data model, apply it to a database, and then actually do some querying, so you can see the whole setup of how it works.
Okay, that's good.
Uh, so very first of all, like I said, this is just a empty project. Really, it's got TS Node, it's got TypeScript. First thing we're going to want to do is actually install Prisma. So I'll just install Prisma here. And this is going to be the CLI tool that you use to actually like initialize Prisma and run migrations and basically anything in the terminal that you would do with Prisma.
Okay.
But to kickstart actually using Prisma in your project, now that we have that CLI installed, we can do npx prisma init.
Okay.
This will initialize Prisma in your project. It's going to set up a folder called Prisma that contains what we call your Prisma schema, and you'll see that in a second. But before I hit enter, I'm going to add the data source provider flag. And for now, to start this off, we'll use SQLite, but I think later on we'll switch it to Postgres just so we can see it working on an external database as well.
Oh, cool. So, quick one as we wait.
Mm-hmm.
Prisma does work with both SQL and NoSQL databases, right?
Yep, that's correct.
So
Yeah,
that
we work well with
means, yeah.
MongoDB.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Yeah, love it.
So now that command has finished running, what you'll see is just a set of next steps, but it did create this Prisma folder here,
Yeah.
and that has a schema.prisma file in it. And this is, I guess to back up, I'll say that Prisma is sort of comprised of three different pieces. There's the Prisma Migrate tool, which is the migration tool that allows you to perform migrations against your database. There's your Prisma schema, which is this file here. This is where you actually model out your database. So you can define your database tables here, all of your indexes, the data source provider that you have. So we're using SQLite. And then generators, which are things that you can generate based on your Prisma schema models.
Oh, interesting.
And then the third piece is obviously the Prisma Client, the ORM that you use, which is generated based off of all of this.
Yeah. Quick. So, this .prisma file is in DSL, right? And I was just curious. I don't know. This is just me being nerdy right now. So, is there like a drawback for using, like I don't know, the .ts files for like the schema? We have to come up with like our own DSL. Why?
Yeah, so currently what Prisma offers is just the .prisma file, the DSL, but there are community packages that allow
Oh,
you to write your schema in TypeScript and it generates this file for you.
oh,
Um, at
that's nice.
Prisma, but we've thought about allowing a basically TypeScript or JavaScript API that allows you to build these, and we still might do that in the future. But
Okay.
the way we think of this right now is that Prisma is providing the building blocks for you to build tooling around what you need. So, like, we see these community people coming up and building tools to do this, and that's exactly what we want to see. We want to see people sort of building off of our building blocks.
Okay, cool. I love it. Mm.
Yeah, so what we have here is just this generator block. This defines the default generator that we have, which is the Prisma client. So basically, this says once we actually build our model and generate um, the resources off of this schema, that it's going to generate the ORM for us. That's exactly
Mhm.
what we want there. And then there's a data source block, which describes what kind of database you're connecting to and how to connect to it. Right now, because I passed the SQLite flag when I initialized Prisma, it's set to a SQLite database. We also support CockroachDB, Mongo, MySQL, Postgres, all of these. Um, and just like what you noticed right here, I just hit Control Space, and our DSL is actually integrated
Yeah.
into VS Code, so you can actually see all of these like little helpers, which is pretty nice. And then this next one on the URL has a function called environment, pointing to database URL, and that's going to point to any environment variables that you have set up.
Okay.
So yeah, this is what we give you to start off with. It just gets you connected to a database, and what we need to actually do is define a data model.
Mhm.
Um,
Oh,
I
I see you
think what
have
I'll do
Copilot
here,
going on.
yeah, I'll actually just use this for now. Copilot does a great job of giving you good stuff to work with.
Mhm.
And this pretty much covers a lot of the pieces that I would have wanted to talk through anyway. So I'll just go through these. We set up a model with a name user, and what this represents is a table in your database. So this is a user table in your database. And each of these listings in here is a field in that table.
Okay.
So of course, we've got the names of each field. We've got the data types, int, string, date, time. And all of these are documented in the Prisma docs, what they actually map to in the underlying database. And you can actually change the types that these map to as well, depending on the data type using different attributes, such as this one, the unique attribute. Um, so the first one we've got here is an integer. We've set it as the @id attribute, which means it's the primary key for the table. And then we've said we want this field to have a default value of an auto-incrementing number. So every time you add a new record to the database table, it will increment the number up.
Oh, interesting.
And the rest of these are very similar as well. We've got strings, we've got optional strings here. So this string, you don't have to pass it a value, but you can if you want to through the ORM. And for this one, values have to be unique. What this unique attribute represents is basically a constraint in the underlying database. So
Yeah.
we'll see in a second, once we actually run a migration and apply this to our database, it'll generate a SQL file that will run against your database. And we can see the constraint that gets built off of this. But that's what that does.
That's nice.
The last two are pretty simple. Created at, it's a date time field with a default to now. So basically, when you create a record, it populates it with a timestamp at the time of creation. And the next one is an updated at, which does something similar, except every time you update that field, Prisma will update this timestamp with the current timestamp.
That makes sense. So a couple of questions.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one is, how easy is it going to be to specify the exact column? Because for column names, most folks prefer a snake case,
Mm-hmm.
right? But of course, in JavaScript, we could go with our like this case, right? So is that possible to do here?
Yeah. So you can do like created at, or if you want your access through the Prisma Client API
Yeah.
to be like this, but you want the underlying column name to be something different, you can
Come on.
always use the at map attribute and provide it your own custom name. So you can say created at there. Of course,
Oh,
this wants double quotes. So that's how you do that. In this
okay.
case, if you access it through JavaScript, it'll look like this, but the
Mm.
underlying database column will look like this.
Oh, perfect. Yes, that's really cool. I love it. Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and also
okay, go
along
ahead.
those lines,
Mm-hmm.
you can do the same exact thing with the table. You
Yeah, the
do
table name,
at
right?
map.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what is map really? Because I might be thinking at column, but now I'm saying at map. Look, I don't know.
Yeah. So what the map does is it's a mapping from what your database calls a piece of data to what
Okay.
the ORM calls your piece of data.
Oh, I see.
So
Okay.
um, like I said previously, what it's doing is it's mapping this created underscore at
Mm.
column in the database to
Okay.
the created at in the ORM. That way,
Okay.
if your team has different conventions on what they use in JavaScript than they do in what's in SQL, you can still honor those conventions through the
Mm-hmm.
schema.
Yeah, I love it. So the last question before you move on, the IDs. How easy would it be to like make it into like a UUID? Do we need like of course, maybe we need like a JavaScript. I think Node has a UUID v4 now, but how easy it is to swap that? You just have to turn it to a string,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's it's actually really easy. Yeah, you turn this into a string here,
Okay.
and then for the default, you can use CUID.
Oh, you have it
This is a
inbuilt.
function.
Oh,
Yeah. So this is a
yeah.
function, and what this does is it tells Prisma when you
Mhm.
perform the migration to use the underlying database's UUID generation method.
Oh,
So by setting
okay.
it to this, yeah, it doesn't do anything in JavaScript here. It actually tells the
Oh,
database to use its own method.
cool. So, okay, now that I think at this point most databases would have it, but does SQLite have it already? Right? Does it?
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
wow. So okay, cool. Yeah, that's really handy because you know UUIDs I think we sort of like prefer it more better because security stuff and all that. But I like it that you
Hmm.
guys thought about
Yeah.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Another cool thing that I just realized I should probably point out
Mm-hmm.
is that you do get like little helpers as you're typing out your Prisma schema. So at first I had this set to int, and
Mm-hmm.
it's going to tell you, hey, you cannot
Yeah, of
use int
course.
on this field because it's supposed to be a string. So
Yeah.
as you write these, you'll also get hints for that if you're using a feature that isn't supported in your database. So like if I
Oh,
do MongoDB, this is no longer going to be valid because MongoDB expects this underscore
yes.
ID column. So you get those helpers as well. So if you ever want to switch databases
Mm-hmm.
and you switch this provider name here, you're going to get a good view of what you need to change to actually move to that database.
Type safe data access indeed. Yeah.
Hmm.
That's really handy. I love the DX so far.
Thanks. Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
I think it's super cool. A lot of this stuff gets
mm.
me pretty excited.
Yeah, really it is. Okay, yeah, sure. So what else do you have
um,
for me?
Yeah, so I think now we'll start going through a little migration just to see what gets generated off of this, and then maybe we'll add a couple of relations to this user table to see what that
Mhm.
looks like, and then we can start actually, playing with some data around it. But to get started, you can do npx Prisma Migrate. This is our migrate tool, and I'm going to do a dev migration, and I'll give the migration a name, and I'll just call it user table, because this adds the user table. And what this is going to go through and do is this is going to actually generate the SQL to perform against your database. And this is going to be creating the user table as was defined. As we can see, not null. We've got the primary key set up properly, and these date times are being updated as they should be. And then, like I had mentioned before, we did have that unique constraint on the email key. So every email has to be unique. So it generates those indexes for you. And then it actually already applied this to your database. So when you run this migration using the dev command, it will actually apply it to your database and generate Prisma Client for you. So at this point, it's ready to go and start putting data in your database.
Sweet.
I think for next, though, now that we have that working, we'll go ahead and add a posts relation to our user table. So I'll create a new table called post, and I'll give it an ID just like we had before. Maybe we'll give it some text. And then we've set up a user relation here. I hit save, and the Prisma VS Code extension set this up automatically for us. So that's pretty nice. What it's doing, though, is it's saying that each post should be associated with a single user. So that's why we have this user type here that refers to this user model. And we're saying the user ID field on this model should point to the ID field on the user model. So that's how we set up that mapping there.
So we have like one-to-many relationship going on.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Cool.
And then there's other options you can pass in here if you need to. We can say like on delete.
Oh. Yeah. Like.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
cascade.
like cascading going. Oh. So that's awesome. So when we delete the user, we delete all the posts the user creates, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Except I think in this case, because the on delete is on the post. Well, actually, no, that is right. Yeah. So if you delete a user, all of the associated posts will be deleted. Along the same lines, we also have on update. So when a user is updated, we can have it perform other operations that you would expect cascading to allow.
Cool. That's sweet.
Yeah. For now, though, I'll leave that out. We don't really need that for the purposes here. But now that I've defined another model, this post model, I can perform another migration. And I'll just say we added the posts. And we're going to see a second migration folder pop up. This one just adds posts. And those should both be good to go in our database now.
Nice.
Yep. At this point, because we performed our migrations, the data models applied to our database, we have Prisma Client already generated based off of that. Normally, you would run npx Prisma generate to generate Prisma Client, but running migrations does that for you, so you don't have to do that extra step.
Okay, so
how's that?
Yeah, so we're back in index.c. Yeah,
Sweet.
I don't know. It's technologies, right?
Yeah, gotta love it, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I guess we should start from the
file.
Oh. The last thing I saw was there was still console.log test in there, but we could start here.
Oh, okay. So what I did, probably while my screen was frozen, I deleted that console log and I just imported Prisma Client and instantiated the Prisma Client class.
Okay.
Just to show Prisma Client's generated now. It's a package we can use. But for now, what I'm going to do is do the same thing in this seed file. I'm instantiating Prisma Client. And then I'll create an async function called main. And within here is what I'm going to do is I'm going to seed some data into the database. And through Prisma, you can actually run a seed command that'll run this function and seed your database with some data.
Cool.
So what I'll do is I'll do main.catch. just to be sure that that's running properly. And then in here, we can actually start to use Prisma Client. So I think to start, I'll await Prisma dot, and then we see we get this, this nice safety here. We get to see what's available in the API. And what I'll do is delete many. And this is just a common thing that I do in seed files. I'll start off by clearing out the database. So all of our tables are posting users tables. I'm going to empty them. And then I'll await prisma.user.create. And this is how we're going to create data in our database. So we're saying we want to create a new user. And there's a couple options we can provide it. The one that I'm going to use is called data. And within here, you get access to all of the columns that you set up in that database table.
Nice.
And let's see if Copilot will help us out a bit. Doesn't look like it will.
Yeah.
I'll just type in all this manually. The rest are optional, so I don't need to fill those out. Maybe I will give it a name, actually. But the cool part about this is that we have that post relation set up, which is a completely separate table.
Okay.
When we create a user, we can create new posts directly within this user create function.
That's
so
handy.
You're going to get a couple of options. Yeah, it is handy, and it allows you to do a couple of different things, which is nice. You can connect, which means if there's an existing post that you want to connect a user to, you can define the IDs of that post, and it'll connect it for you. You can create, which would create a brand new post and automatically hook up that relation to the user. Or you could do connect or create, which is sort of like an upsert, where it's going to look for an ID and say if a post exists with that ID, connect it. Otherwise, create a new post and connect it that way.
Yeah, that's really smart. That's really cool.
Yeah, and I think little things like this are where the DX that I was talking about comes into play, where there's just these little things that don't seem like much, but in the long run, they do save you a bit of time and some code complexity.
Yeah, that's really cool. I like it. So again, database thinking. So what do we do for the password really?
Sorry, in what way?
Yeah, so in terms of the storage, do you have to do that in userland code, or does Prisma magically hash it off for some reason? I'm thinking it does not, but just tell me what's the story on passwords?
Yeah. So there is a story there, actually. We don't automatically hash passwords because as far as Prisma is concerned, that's just a string field. It thinks it's just a string. It doesn't really know it's a password. What you can do with Prisma, though, and what people have done in the community is there's a concept of Prisma Client extensions. And what that does is it allows you to extend your Prisma Client with custom logic. And what we've seen people do is create extensions where they extend, say, the user model. And if there's ever a password that gets passed into it, they'll hash it before it gets saved to the database. So that does live in your application code. It's not handled by Prisma directly, but we do give you ways to do that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, as expected, because of course you wouldn't know how I want my password hashed. I want to use Bcrypt or Argon, so of course you let me have that. I like it.
Yeah. That's one thing that you'll see as sort of a common trend with Prisma ORM, and sometimes it gives us some trouble in our GitHub issues because people expect certain things. But we try not to make too many assumptions. We try to give you the tools to do things how you want to without forcing you to do anything too specific of a way.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So what we've got here now is we're creating a user, and then we want to create some associated posts. I'll use the create option because we know that none exist yet. I'll give it some text. And yeah, that'll be it. And so this is very simple, but we'll just say this is our seed file. We'll create one user and one post associated with it. Now that we have that set up, what you can do is go in your package JSON. You can add a Prisma key here. And that Prisma key takes in an object. One of the options there is seed. And you can run ps node prisma seed.ts.
Okay.
And so with that hooked up, that gives us the ability to go down into our terminal and run npx prisma pb seed. And that's going to execute the command. The seed command has been executed. And at this point, we can't really see it yet because we don't have a UI for it, but the data has been stored in our database.
Yes. Awesome.
Yeah, and that sounds like some magic right now because you can't actually see where it
Yeah.
is. So let's actually go in and
Let,
look.
let's verify that claim.
Yeah, Prisma. Yeah, I promise I'm not lying. We'll see right here.
Show me
Prisma
the
has a
code.
tool called Studio. Yeah, and if we hit that, it's going to open up a project on localhost.
Oh, whoa. So now that's cool. So you come bundled up with your own GUI for like seeing the database.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
And
just rich.
I may have to switch my screen share really quick because I realize I'm only sharing a window,
Oh,
and I should be sharing the whole screen. So
yeah.
um,
Okay, so
let me.
I'm gonna come here. Then you could share
Cool.
the window. Then I go back.
Gotcha.
Yeah, this is okay. Yeah, share the screen, not the window.
Yeah, the whole screen. There we go.
Yeah, this is really fun. I really love databases, and working with data is always gets me excited. So yeah, I'm
Yeah,
switching. I'm switching back.
cool.
Mhm.
So here's why I had to do that. So it opened up localhost 5555. That's just our default port. It opened up our own little GUI called Prisma Studio. And this is where you can go in, view all of your tables, view the data in those tables, and you can even perform operations like updating data and stuff like that here. Um, so we can see we have one user and one post. So that's what we expect from our seed command.
Yeah.
We can go in and we can see all of that data here.
Hmm.
And it even shows the relations. So we can see that on our user table, this user has one post associated with it, and we can
Hmm.
see that in here.
Mm.
So it's a nice little tool that we provide, I think, for just quick iteration. This will also work with like an external database. We're using SQLite right now, but you can also connect this to any database hosted on any cloud provider.
Okay. So how hard would that be? Because I'm just trying to parse it in my head. Because with the SQLite one, we didn't need to do any extra um credentials. So I'm expecting for like Postgres in the database provider, you're going to pass in the URL for the connection string. Is Prisma Studio just going to pick that up and just show us the stuff?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow,
That's what it'll do.
magic.
When you open up Prisma Studio, it's going to do the same thing. It's going to look at this
Hmm.
database URL variable and just use your credentials there.
Magic.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that tool, Prisma Studio, is one of the more underrated tools I think Prisma offers. This is, I mean, I use it a ton when I'm just developing an application.
Yeah.
Um, that way I don't have to download any extra GUIs for SQLite and stuff like that.
Hmm.
It's just a hassle.
Yeah. That's seriously, it's really cool. I like it.
Sweet. And I think where we'll go to next with this is actually, um, now that we've seeded our data, we can actually start using the Prisma client to query some of it. So let me see if it'll let me open my code again. There we
Yeah,
go.
you should. Yeah.
So back in this index.ts file, we had started to import Prisma and instantiate it. So that looks like it's done. I'll do sort of the same starting thing here where I'll just create a main function and run it. And then within here is where we can just start playing with the different Prisma functions. So we saw the delete many, we saw the create before. We have a whole bunch of them. So if we go into await Prisma dot say user, this is the list of functions we have.
Okay.
There's a bunch of them. All of them are documented on our website, and I'm not going to go through every single one, obviously, today,
Okay.
but we do
So
offer a
yeah.
bunch.
So this is like the Prisma DQL, the data query language. So
Yeah, exactly.
oh wow. I see some handy one. Find unique or throw.
Hmm.
Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, all of these are super useful. Are there any specific ones that you'd like to see sort of explained on here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
Um, I think this one's a useful one. This count function here. What we're going to see is sort of just the safety here. So let's do const count equals await prisma.user.count. So this is going to take the user table. It's going to count the records in it.
Yeah.
And as you would expect, this should return just a count, which is a number. And we'll find that that's exactly what we get back because of how Prisma is generating these types.
Cool.
Similarly, if we do like a, say, find many, this is to search for many records. We can pass it a filter using the where key here.
Mm-hmm.
And let's just say we want to find any user where the email is test. And once we find that user, we want to select just a certain amount of fields from it. We don't want to get the whole user back. Maybe for safety reasons, we don't want to return the password. So all we're going to get is the ID and the email. I'll change this variable name to user. The reason I show this, specifically this part here, is, this part here, we're selecting the ID and email. So what we're going to see is that the generated type is only going to have the ID and email. It won't have the entire user object. If we were to leave this out, we would see that we actually get a user object back, which will contain everything. So this is one of those cool things that Prisma does, where depending on the individual query you run, the type is different, and it sort of updates itself based on your needs.
Sweet.
A lot of the ORMs that are out there right now, even if you were to do something like this, where you like filter down the selection of columns, it's still gonna give you, like, for example, here it would still give you like a user object back instead of just the individual ID. So this sort of sets us apart from some of those. I know a lot of the ORMs nowadays are starting to move towards this direction, which is great to see. It's awesome that people are like making these more fine-grained type adjustments. But I think that's sort of where we've shown for a while.
Yeah, it's very, very convenient, especially if you have this whole TypeScript workflow going on. Like the DX is just superb, really. Like, I like it.
And I think we've got that in a user variable now, so I'll go ahead and log that, and let's just run this so that we can actually see what it looks like to run the function on an actual script. So if we do npm run dev, that's just a script I set up to run this. We're going to see we get nothing back, and that's because we're looking for a user with an email named test, which we don't actually have.
Yeah,
So instead, I'll do, I think I used this email when I set up the user. If we run it, we should get, we get the ID, which is what we selected back. And so that's stored right in our database.
awesome.
Yeah, there's a couple more things in the Prisma client that I would like to show off. But before I do, I would like to set up a Postgres database now and connect this to an external database. Does that seem like something you'd want to see on stream, or would you prefer I stick in the Prisma client?
No, please, let's live on the edge. Let's go wild. Let's connect to
Yeah,
Postgres.
cool. No, I'm glad, because I think this is another one of those superpower things that
Yeah.
Prisma does, is that switching your database provider is as simple as basically just changing one thing. So let
So
me
where
get
are
your
we
face
right
back.
now? Let's just grab.
We're in. This is Railway. Railway is
Okay.
something that I tend to use when I am just toying around with databases. It's really simple. I have a Railway project. If I go to my dashboard, there's a project called Dotting Minister. That's a generated name. And within here, you can add different services like databases. So I'm going to add a database service. We'll do a Postgres database. And then that's going to spin up Postgres. It's usually really quick, so let's see how quick it goes. Oh, it's already done. Cool. So that's why I love Railway. It's as easy as that. I now have a Postgres database that I can connect to. In the data tab, you can see it's empty right now. That's fine. We'll connect to it in a second. So I'll get my database URL, and you'll probably see my credentials. That's fine. I'll be deleting those soon after the stream anyway, so it doesn't matter. So what I did there, I copied the connection string, pasted it back in my .env file. So now we're using Postgres. The last thing we need to do, though, is actually change this provider to Postgres. That's all we needed to do. Now our Prisma app is running on Postgres instead of SQLite.
Wait,
Um,
you didn't have to install anything else. You just said I was thinking it sort of like works with drivers. So we're gonna have like a Postgres driver. But you're telling me that Prisma currently can understand the Postgres database and wow.
yeah. So you're going to hear a lot of things like on social media about our Prisma engines, about
Okay.
how sometimes they can be bulky. We've been working on shortening the size of those. Those are what allow you to do this. Those Prisma engines understand the different dialects of SQL and NoSQL. That way you can switch your provider and it just kind of works.
Interesting.
Um, yeah, but so this gets you working where in Prisma Client you could work with Postgres, but we still do need to run our first migration.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to do is I'll delete this migrations folder because this is all of our SQLite migrations. We don't need this database anymore either, so I'll go ahead and delete that. And I'll do the same exact thing we did before. I'll do npx prisma migrate dev name, and this time I'll just call it init because it's the first migration here. And this is, as you can see, connecting to our Railway database, and it's going to generate the same migrations we saw before, and it's going to apply them to our new Postgres database instead. And then, looks like that worked. We got a success message. I'll also run the seed command, npx prisma db seed. It's the same one we ran before. And with that done, we can go back into Railway. If we head into data, we now see we have post, we have users. And if we pop those open, we've got our test data in there. So it's as easy as that. We just switched our, like, it's simple here, but in the case of like a larger application, we just switched our application to a different database, which is super cool.
Wow. That's interesting. Like, yeah, so now you just made me more curious, right? Because if it's that easy to switch databases, how easy is it going to be to have different models use different databases? Yeah, so for example, right, the post model is going to be using SQLite, and the user
Hmm.
model will use Postgres. Is that a thing?
It's not. In that case, what you would do is you would set up multiple Prisma schemas. And within each
Okay.
of those individual Prisma schemas, you can generate different Prisma clients. Um,
Okay.
so like if you wanted to
Okay.
have a SQLite Prisma client,
Mm-hmm.
you can have all your models in the SQLite schema that
Mm-hmm.
to deal with SQLite. And then you want some stuff in Postgres, you would set up a different schema, generate another one. And then
Mm-hmm.
in like your index.ts file, you could just import the different Prisma clients that got generated for those and name them, SQLite client or Postgres client.
Okay, cool. Yeah, okay. But the query, the prisma.user.findMany is still going to be able to detect, whether it's SQLite or Postgres. It doesn't care, right?
Right.
Yeah, it
So
doesn't.
if we look here, like at the
Mm-hmm.
query I was running, this
Mm-hmm.
doesn't need to change at all.
Okay.
At this
Yeah.
point, if we run npm run dev, we're still going to get our data back. Didn't have to change it even after we moved
Yeah.
from.
That's totally cool. Yeah, this is fun. Yeah.
Yeah, it's there's a lot of cool little things to go through here
Mm-hmm.
that are just it makes the experience really nice. I think
Mm-hmm.
another one that's fun to show. Sorry, I get all excited, so
Yeah,
feel
no,
free to stop
please,
me if you need
please.
me
No, no,
to
no, go
if you need
ahead.
me to show anything.
I'm a
Um,
database nerd too, so please, let's do this.
Prisma Client has its own set of logging functions. So what I've done here is I've turned on query logging. So
Mm-hmm.
if we actually run this same command as before, we're now also going to get some output that shows the actual query that was run. Um, this is
Wow.
good for debugging,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you are in one of those cases that we see pop up occasionally on Twitter or in issues where someone is having like performance issues. This
Yeah.
is a good way to go in and see like where that issue might be coming from.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, you can do different kinds of logging. I'll do let's say info. This one's nice too because it'll also tell you information about like the connection pool. So for example, running this find many created 21 connections to the database, which might sound like a lot. It's because we haven't set any like defaults on it, so it just takes up the entire pool.
Okay.
That's totally fine. We can change that in settings. That's not really a Prisma thing. It's more of a database thing.
Yeah.
But it gives you this view into what's going on also behind the queries so that you can see, where you might need help.
Yeah. Okay. So this is all good, right? So in the actual scenario, I probably want to use it in like a app like setup, right? So maybe like in my Fastify app with Spurs. No, like I don't know. Does next. So how does that story work? I just pick any your favorites and just
Mm-hmm.
tell me about it. You don't really have to like build it, but just like what's going to change? How does it piece together? That
Yeah.
kind of yeah.
For the most part, it's going to be pretty similar. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
be really similar to this actually. The only difference is that if you're using, for example, in Next, that's what I tend to use is
Okay.
Next.js.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what you'll want to do is probably have like a lid folder.
Okay.
Inside lid folder, you'd have like a prisma.ts file. Here,
Mm-hmm.
you would basically do this part. You would
Oh.
import Prisma Client, instantiate it, and then you would export that. Um, Along with that, there would probably be some logic in there to see if Prisma has been instantiated previously. If it has, reuse the old one. Otherwise, create a new one. Because Next.js, when you're developing with Next.js, it has live reload.
Mm-hmm.
And every time it reloads, it would create a new Prisma client. You don't really want that. So in
Oh.
a
Okay.
normal case, in a normal application, you would instantiate it in its own file and do
Mm-hmm.
that check before you actually use it.
Cool. Oh, so that's just it. So that's definitely fine. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So any other
if,
geekiness for me to look at?
yeah.
Amazing.
One
The
one
amazing
more
world
quick
of
thing.
Prisma.
One more quick thing. I did
Okay.
write a tool called try-prisma.
Oh. Okay.
Latest. And let me see. I'll just run this here. What this does is it allows you to try Prisma with different languages using different projects. So
Mm-hmm.
let's look at JavaScript, for example. If you want to use Prisma with JavaScript, there's a bunch of different ways that you can use it. These are just starter templates that we've set up. They're
Mm-hmm.
not meant to build an application off of. They're meant to show you um, what the
Mm.
setup should look like to use Prisma in these projects.
Yeah.
So, like I was just talking about Next, let's go ahead and just create this project. What it's going to do is download it. It's going to set it up for you, and then I can just enter the directory. My window's small here, but it shows you like what you need to do. So I'll do cd
Yeah.
JavaScript. Mm, yeah.
Mm.
And then here, this is going to be what I was just mentioning.
Okay.
This is that Prisma.js file where you import it, you look for a global version of it, and then you use it if you haven't created one already.
Mm. Awesome.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
if you're ever curious what Prisma looks like with a specific technology, that tool tends to have most of the different combinations you can use out there. And if it doesn't, we actively add to it. So
Mm-hmm.
feel free to
Yeah.
suggest new templates.
I noticed you have like a GraphQL thing going. So there's a Prisma GraphQL story too.
Um, where did you see that?
Yeah, like in the try Prisma, I thought I saw like a GraphQL. Like there's a
Oh,
REST
oh.
and there's a GraphQL.
So
Yeah.
that is, let's see here, try Prisma, JavaScript.
Yeah,
So this would
GraphQL
just
off.
be like
Mm-hmm.
another starter application that uses
Mm-hmm.
GraphQL. So if we wanted to pop that one open,
Okay.
we'll download that. What was it called?
Yeah, I think you did it in the same spreadsheet. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
that's
think
fine.
that's probably fine for now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can open this guy. So this is just going to be the same exact sort of thing we saw, except now this is a GraphQL starter. So we're using Prisma Client, creating some resolvers, creating our schema here, and then this is our GraphQL server running Apollo in this case.
Okay, interesting. So that it's I don't know. Okay, let's see. So how does Prisma interface with this entire setup behind the scene? I don't know. I still find it trippy.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
if you think about the way, like in this case, if you think about the way a GraphQL server is set up, you're
Mm-hmm.
going to have your GraphQL schema, which still exists. That's
Yeah.
different than your database schema, so that's it's still defined. You have your GraphQL schema. You'll have your context, which is going to provide Prisma Client to your GraphQL server. And then in this case, when you set up, like if I could find a good example here, yeah, there we go. When you set up your queries in GraphQL, rather than querying your database as you normally would, this is where you would just use Prisma from that context that you set up.
Okay.
Mm.
That's smart. That's neat. Yeah, got it. So this has been fun. I think we're at time now. Like, do you have anything more you want to show me? Because I could spare.
Oh, I could go on all day, so you'll
Oh,
probably want to stop me somewhere.
okay. 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 Yeah. So let's off the top of your head, right? Are there any newer things that just recently made its way to Prisma, or everything that you just showed me have been in there for like forever? That would just be too
Uh,
good to be.
yeah, most of the stuff that I showed you is the stuff that we've had for a while. We're
Mhm,
obviously constantly improving on all of this stuff, so there might
mhm.
be new stuff here and there, but most of the stuff is just things that we've always had. Our focus right now at Prisma is on making what you just saw more performant,
Okay.
making
Yeah.
the things run better on the edge and in serverless environments.
Mhm.
And we had a couple of product announcements recently, and actually coming up very, very soon, we have some really big announcements of new products coming out.
Mhm.
Um, but those are based around Prisma's new focus on building um, products that allow you to set up your data infrastructure in a serverless and edge setting much easier, much more easily.
Yeah.
So yeah, so keep an eye out for those. Those are like Accelerate and Pulse, and then there's other stuff we'll be announcing pretty shortly
Yeah.
that go
Yeah.
along
Yeah.
with those.
Yeah. So I'm really excited at what we're doing with the edge and serverless, like and the whole performance in the JavaScript ecosystem. It's really
Mm.
good. Yeah, I'm looking out to see how how much awesome you could make this because this is great, right? It's superb. I like it. So yeah, yeah. Thank you, Sabin.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was really fun. I have to hold myself and stop myself from geeking out too much on database stuff because I don't know. There's just something about databases that just excites me. So
Yeah.
yeah. So now thank you. This was an amazing session. I really learned a lot about Prisma. I've never had to use Prisma myself, but with the entire DX, I love it. So for coming to TKYT, you always have, an open plug, so you could plug anything you want. So you could plug away whatever you want to give a shout out, want to give a plug, just go for it.
Yeah. I think I do have a couple things. First of all, like I just mentioned, we have like big announcements coming out very soon.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out for those. I also um, have a community member who's developed a really in-depth course on using Prisma and Svelte. Um,
Okay.
and he gave me, I think it was 10. He gave me 10 invite codes to get that course for free.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if anyone wants to reach out to me
Mm-hmm.
on my Twitter, shoot me a DM and I'll get you
Mm-hmm.
access to that course.
Ooh, cool stuff. So yeah, so that Twitter, what's the handle? So we could reach you.
Uh, it's at Sabin the Dev. It's just my
Okay.
first name, the Dev.
Mm.
Um,
Okay. Yeah,
yeah, so if
awesome.
yeah, if you find me on Twitter, yeah, reach out if you're interested in SvelteKit and Prisma because it looks like a great course. I haven't gone through it yet because I've been saving the invite codes,
Yeah, sure.
but I'd be happy to share them with whoever wants
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, thank you. Sharing is amazing. Sharing is caring. So thank you so much, Sabin. I love this session. I'm gonna leave your Twitter and the link to Prisma or any other resource I will put in the description notes. So thank you for your time and yeah, thank you for coming to the session.
Great, thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.